Hi, BookTube. Welcome to Jackie's Literary Corner. I am Jackie, and it's time for our last 7 on Sunday for July. And this week's topic is books that got me into reading. And the first book, I'm just going to get it done and over because I know people, with the author, they don't like to talk about this book. But I will say that for like most of us 90s kids, I did get into Harry Potter is the first one I'm going to talk about. This was my first series that was close to high fantasy, not like Lord of the Rings, but there was more fantasy involved, and you were almost completely immersed in another world. I mean, of course, it kind of takes place in the real world, but there's when when Harry and his friends get to school, they're surrounded by magic. They're in a castle. And it was just it became the first series that I got into. I mean, there are other series I read, but this one I was like completely committed, like completely getting into the story, just completely like focused only on that. Like the other series that I read were more like I just get into like you can get into them anytime you want. Like the Suki Stackhouse books. It was kind of like the other series that I got into were kind of like that. So yeah, the Harry Potter series, like for most people, it was something that, I even remember I got it when it was at Borders. I was at the midnight release of Goblet of Fire at my bookstore. So it just was like, it still means something to me, like most people. It's too bad though that, the author and everything. But anyway, so number 2 is one of those series that I feel like you can jump into whenever you want, and that is the Goosebumps series by R.L. Stine. This is a very middle grade horror, so there was some books that were gross out horror, some that were really creepy. I mean, I feel like I was more into the Are You Afraid of the Dark show than the Goosebumps books. But I still read them, and I had a couple of them, not a lot of them, like not a bunch of them like some people did. But they were kind of my first foray into horror before I discovered the delights of Stephen King. It was just, and my favorite one is probably still to this day The Haunted Mask, which is funny because I think the one for me, my favorite horror is usually the ones that would actually scare me in real life. I feel like that's the point of horror. It's supposed to scare you. So maybe even traumatize you a little bit. But I always been creeped out by masks, particularly the ones that cover your whole face and they smell like rubber. And of course there's clowns and I fear and all that good stuff that and I don't remember if there were any ironically though, I feel like I watched the show more than I read the books. But like I said, I did read the books. These were, like I said, they were my first foray into horror before, Stephen King. Next is the other major fantasy world that I got into that was actually kind of chunky, like and a little bit more mature. Not mature as in adult content necessarily, but mature as in more like not just about kids dealing with teen problems and drama, and that was the Dragonlance series, which I have not read in years, but I remember loving it. And actually I did start when Lord of the Rings became a movie, it kind of reminded me of the Dragonlance series. There were a lot of similarities. So obviously I'm guessing that Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman might have been inspired a little bit by Tolkien, like most fantasy writers. But yeah, I remember I loved the series, loved the Tanis, the half elf, half human. Raceland, the sorcerer who was kind of evil or had a dark side to him. His brother Cameron I cannot remember what his name, but he had a brother who worked in. Him and his wife had this little tavern inn place. And then you had the Kender. I cannot remember his name, but he reminded me of hobbits a little bit. You know, he was very silly, absent-minded character, but always friendly and ready to help. I wish I could remember his name. I'm surprised I remember some of these other character names. And then they were authors that would write, like, kind of like how Robin Hobb has a bunch of trilogies in the one world. Like, so Dragonlance is the one big world, and the authors would have series of books in the one world, in like 3 books per, series. And like at one point, the books were started to be about their children and the next generation. I remember the first trilogy was based on seasons, I believe. And I would love to buy them again, but there's so many. Granted, they're mass markets. I probably could buy them if I wanted to, but I don't have the space. So, I mean, I have a whole, like, I do put all my mass markets on my top shelves, but, like, I would love to buy them, But I feel like I can't justify with the space and all, so. Maybe one day if I ever have my own place, because then I won't have to worry about, my mom being like, you don't have the space in your room. And I can have piles of books in my room without mom being like, she still might if, But anyway, so yeah, again, obviously I remember some of the characters, so yeah, that was kind of my first more mature fantasy series that I got into. That just was fun, and I enjoyed it, and I wish I could come back to it and rebuy the books. But like I said, I don't have the space. Next is, so I tried to put in some books from my childhood. But I didn't want to put anything like Dr. Seuss or, like my book called The Coconut Tree, where all the letters of the alphabet are trying to climb up the coconut tree. I didn't want to put those. I wanted to put books that weren't like kiddie books, but actually required a little bit more effort. So, I picked The Velveteen Rabbit, which I think was last year. I read a book about the author of that, Marjorie Williams Bianco, and her daughter was an artist, so she created the original artwork of the first edition of this book, I believe. I think that's what that was. And the daughter, unfortunately, had some mental health issues, I believe, and maybe even depression, or I don't remember, but something along those lines. But this was kind of my first book in childhood that was kind of special to me, and it was like about, this boy gets this toy rabbit, and the rabbit one day asks the toy rocking horse about being real, and the horse explains you gotta be loved so much that you become real. And I think at one point the boy gets sick and he becomes very attached to the rabbit, so the rabbit is hoping he'll become real. It's a very touching story. It's just so sweet. It was actually a gift from my aunt and uncle, and the edition I had has these beautiful paint like artwork that I absolutely love. But like I said, I think her daughter was the original artist, and this one was someone different. So it was just a childhood book that meant a lot to me. So I wanted to include that in books that got me into reading. Okay, so next. So I was a doll collector growing up. Not just Barbies, but those, dolls. So I never watched the movie Chucky because of that. Because I love my dolls and I don't want to be creeped out by them. So, I had the American Girl dolls, and I had, another doll that, as well, called the Magic Attic dolls. So the American Girl dolls came with both dolls came with sets of books, stories that go with whichever doll you have. So American Girls was one of my first early chapter books. That was also a little bit more mature, and it had history, and it was historical, so it had some history in it. Um, so I had 3 of them. I had Samantha, I had Molly, and I had Kit. And each one was from a different time period. I think Samantha was from the early 1900s, so World War I time period. Kit was from the 1930s. Molly was from the 40s. So each of them had like a book that was their birthday. One was they each learned a lesson. One was school, their first day of school. And there were books about friendship and learning lessons about life lessons, and they were, in kind of probably in the vein of L.M. Montgomery's, Anne of Green Gables series, but set, not in Canada, but in America, in the United States. And they were always so fun, and I just enjoyed reading them. And like I said, and and for some reason, I remember the name of her aunt and uncle were the gardeners. Samantha's aunt and uncle. I always remember them. And there was one book where she talks about her uncle Gardner getting a car. And of course, so that one always, I don't know why I remember that one, but, I don't remember it that well, but I remember that aspect of it. But they were always so fun to read, and, I liked getting the dolls and all the different props and clothes that came with them, more so than reading the books at the time, but, yeah. And then the other one, like I said, was The Magic Attic. It was a group of 4 or 5 girls, and they go to this neighbor's in the story, the overarching story, they go to they have this neighbor who has this attic, and they go through the stuff, and she has all these costumes that when they put on the costumes and look in the mirror, all of a sudden they get transported to the time period that costume is set in. And it's like an adventure, and, they get into danger and all that. I don't remember those as well, but I would love to reread them if I could get access to them. I don't know if I asked my mom if I still had them a while back, but if I do, either they are in the box under my bed with my dolls, which I don't think so. I don't think they're there, or they're in a box in the guest room where my nephews and niece stay. They in their closet we have a bunch of stuff from my sister and mine, my old school stuff, and other things like our stuffies, as their sister Charlotte calls them, and a bunch of other things, and some books. And I think one of those boxes probably contains the books, might contain the books for the American Girl and Magic Attic Club books. So like I said, each of those books also came with a doll as well. So I had Megan, who Megan wore yellow. She always wore yellow. She had red hair, kind of the brownish red hair, not like the dark red, but not the orange red, like more of the closer to auburn, I think, if I remember correctly. And for a while I was like, my favorite color is yellow because Megan's favorite color is yellow. And my sister had Allison, who wore blue, and she had blonde hair. Now I don't remember those stories. I remember those stories less than the American Girl stories. But I remember really enjoying them and having such fun with them, and the idea of, like, ever since then, I've always, the idea of a magic portal in an attic has always been a really cool concept to me. In fact, my room actually has, in my closet, there's a door to an attic space. It's not like, it's not like a big room, it's just a little space that's with insulation, and then there's our Christmas decorations are up there, and it's always hot, and you could just walk across the room, walk back and forth. It's not a big space. Like my one grandma, my maternal grandmother, has a bigger attic space than mine is, which that one you can walk all the way around the house. And I've always wanted to go up there, but I'm worried I might get stuck up there, and I might panic and get claustrophobic, or, so I've never done it, but the idea of it is just really intriguing and a bit of a always like, I keep, there's a magic door. Like, I've always been obsessed with magic doors, portal, or like rabbit hole kind of situation because of that series of books. So next is, I'm going to say the Charmed books. I love the show Charmed. That was my first adult fantasy paranormal show that I ever got into. That wasn't teens, it was adults. It's an adult show, so they had books. Kind of like how they have the Supernatural books for the show Supernatural. Well, they had books for the Charmed ones, and it did get formulaic after a while. It kind of got boring, but they were still kind of fun, and like, I felt very adult for reading them. Like, it was just always like so much fun. But now, looking back, I feel like I try to, because they felt formulaic, I don't read books anymore that are based on TV shows or movies that already came out, and then they decided, well, we're going to write books for them, so you'll have extra stories, which I get it. It's a marketing thing, and it's fun to, explore more stories that weren't on screen in books. You get more stories with these characters. So I get the appeal of it, and I liked it at one time, but I don't like as much anymore. When I think about it, now I'm thinking, oh, it's just going to be like watching an episode. It's just on page, and, it's in paragraph format. So it's basically like watching an episode, which for some people is a positive, but for me now it comes off as a negative. But yeah, it was my first, it was like supernatural stories, kind of like Goosebumps, but a little more mature than Goosebumps. But not as mature as, like, Stephen King. Because I was not one of those kids that grew up with, like, reading The Hobbit, or, I can't think of another one, or Dune or something in that, where you read it at a really young age and you're like, and ever since then you have nostalgia feelings for it and you think it's the best thing ever. I didn't grow up with those high fantasy and sci-fi, type books. I was kind of more like, which I have always wondered, asking my mom about my reading level. What was my reading level? Because I don't think I read anything that was super mature. But that, I don't know if that reflects my reading, if that means my reading level was, because even then I read a lot as a kid. But anyway, so those are the books that I feel like got me into reading growing up. Please share, what are some of the books that got you into reading, or did you read any of the books I mentioned? Like Goosebumps, or, Dragonlance, or had you ever heard of the American Girls, The Dolls and Books, or the Magic Attic Club? Feel free to share in the comments below. I would love to know. And if you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, click subscribe, and click the bell icon if you want to be notified when I upload my latest videos. And I hope you're enjoying your reading, and I will talk to you all later. All right, bye!